We've surveyed the Testimonium of Josephus piece by piece in our last vid, and now we'll take a step back and consider some arguments concerning it as a whole. The three arguments that follow defend the proposition that Josephus authored at least some part of the Testimonium, though not every bit of it as we now have it. The first point is one we'll have to develop the second aspect of in a later vid in this series. The shorter reference to Jesus in Josephus, as you can see, refers to Jesus in a very brief and elusive way. Josephine scholars say that this makes best sense if there had been a previous reference to Jesus, in which Josephus had offered more details, and the Testimonium would be that prior reference. Of course, this takes for granted the authenticity of the shorter reference, and we'll need to address that in a later vid. The second point is that in another place in the Antiquities, Josephus refers to another well-known biblical figure, John the Baptist. The Gospels describe a rather extensive relationship between John and Jesus. If a Christian interpolator had invented the Testimonium wholesale, you'd think they'd make light of this connection and milk it for all it was worth. But take a look at how far away the reference to John is from the Testimonium. I should probably add that when fundy atheists get desperate, they like to suggest that the reference to John is also an interpolation, and that the forgers were simply clever enough to know better than to make an obvious connection. At that point, for all the evidence there is for that theory, you may as well blame the interpolations on these guys. Last point we'll cover for this round is that there's simply no Christian track record of large-scale interpolation into non-Christian documents. Sure, the fundy atheists have this picture of evil Christian scribes desperately corrupting manuscript after manuscript. But the evidence just doesn't exist for that. If the Testimonium were an interpolation, it would be, as Josephine scholar Steve Mason puts it, an act of unparalleled scribal audacity. Now, one pushback to this has been that there is such an example of wholesale interpolation, in a Slavonic or Old Russian version of Josephus. That version of Josephus adds a lot more about Jesus, such as a passage saying that Pilate released Jesus because he had healed his wife when she was dying. But there are problems with that example. Not only was Slavonic Josephus created about 1,000 years after the New Testament, it's also not really clear that the additions were interpolations. Slavonic Josephus may have been a sort of historical anthology, in which parts of Josephus's original work were used as one of the main sources, with no intention to fool readers into thinking the whole of it had been authored by Josephus. That's a few positive notes in favor of the Testimonium. In our next vid, we'll have a look at some efforts to negate the Testimonium as being to some extent authentic. See you then.